What's up, guys? What do you think of my new lighting? Okay, I've got another more serious question for you. Do you want to know the subject of my upcoming ebook that I'll be publishing just for my patrons on Patreon? Well, it's quite funny that this game in the Latvian Team Championship that I'm going to show you actually features the subject of my new ebook. So it's time to spill the beans. After e4, I mean, if you're playing a high-rated player, why not go for the gusto? So e5, knight f3, knight c6, and we have the Italian game. Now, those of you who watch the video Yakovenko's Fiddler will be saying, oh, I'm just going to be nice and solid and play my move d3, castles, and trade like a royal pairs and take it from there. But this video is going to be for people who like a bit more spice in their chess. Where with d4 we have... Okay, who can tell me what this opening is now that white is playing? Very good, kids. We are indeed playing the Scotch Gambit as white. Favourite opening among many Australian junior players, actually. And the reason is because it does very well at the amateur level. So, after e5, I should also mention about Max Illingworth. You might see his rating is already 2700 now. In fact, he's the first player from the African continent to ever actually go to 700 plus ELO. He's an Egyptian player, and actually I played him in last year in the Abu Dhabi Masters, and he ended up outplaying me in this complex King's Indian middle game, which might be the subject of another video. Anyway, in this position here, I want to see if you can find the move that Bassem played at this point. I'll give you a moment to think about it. So maybe your first thought was, my knight's under attack, so we'd better move it. And in fairness, moving that knight's not such a bad idea in this position, where there's a lot of theory that I will cover in my ebook. But the most thematic reaction to e5 is to play d5. And it's a good move because we're hitting back in the centre. And if you want to take the initiative, you have to eventually make a counter-attack and find a way to attack the opponent back. And by ignoring their threat, that's the way to do so. Of course, if we play e takes f6, d takes c4, I mean, white is just a pawn down in this position after bishop g7. And yeah, you don't really want to play this as white, to be honest. So rather than going for that unfavourable tactical sequence, white played bishop to b5, pinning the knight. I'll show my ebook that actually knight d7 is not such a bad move here. I think Erwin Lamy played it quite recently, if I'm not mistaken. He is second of Anish Giri. But we had knight e4 in the game. Knight takes d4, of course, threatening the knight on c6. And now after bishop d7, okay, a puzzle for club players out there. With which piece should we take on c6 this position? The knight or the bishop? Well done if you found the move bishop takes c6. So why is it better to take with the bishop? It's because basically we don't want to lose a tempo moving that bishop later, as would happen after, for example, knight c6. There was a very famous Morphy game that I'm probably going to write on my Patreon at some point, where Morphy just went for the jugular with, I think, bishop c5 and brought the queen to h4, and there's this very fast attack on f2. And when we play this opening, we very much want to keep control. In particular, if we just take this position, we want to keep a good grip over the central dark squares as such. Remember, there's one thing I learned from a figured game by Evgeny Sveshnikov, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I can just play out some not so good moves for black, just to show what white is strategically aiming for. Let's say black castles rather than thinking, well, we need to get c5 moving along. Well, in this position we might play f3, just put the boot to the knight. Just close that Facebook message. F4, knight to e4, and we can just play knight to d2 here, just attacking the knight. And you don't particularly want to have a weak e4 pawn, I guess. So they might take us with knight takes, queen takes. Again, you don't really want to have to worry about the this problem of this pawn being It's pawn center being a massive issue. So let's say black plays, I don't know, let's say they play bishop b6 for argument's sake. Alright, here it's very important for white to find the right move. Because if you let them play c5 and d4, you know they've actually got quite decent play with their pawns, and maybe their bishop can get active as well. So what might we do to make sure that we are the master of the dark squares as white? Very good. We can in fact play knight b3, making sure that we keep that strong grip over the c5 square. If they go queen c7, no problem. We can even play, I was going to say queen c3 and just cover this c5 square again. But in fact c5 is maybe not such a threat in this position. Maybe we can just put our rook on e1 instead, so that when they play c5, of course, we can simply take this pawn. And I do think white is better here, because if you let white go f5 and f6, you'll get a pretty nasty attack, as we will in fact see in the main game. It is true black shouldn't play castles. He'd be much better advised to play bishop b6 and use that tempi to get those pawns moving before we can blockade the c5 and d4 squares. Those of you who have been in Australian chess for a long time may recall the game between Raymond Song against Tomek Ray from the 2005 City of Sydney Championship as a model example from white's point of view in this line. So in the game, because bishop e3, bishop b6 is slightly annoying, white flicked in f3, which is in fact the main move. Knight g5 is kind of forced, and white came up with a very unusual move here of playing knight c3. Why do I say it's unusual? Because, well, black's going to try and bring their knight around and put pressure on our knight on d4. So usually as white I play bishop e3, and if I'm not mistaken there was a very nice game between Jones, Gawain Jones that is, against Shahryar Mamedyarov in I believe the 2005 Rapid Tournament, World Rapid Championship in Berlin. I can't remember how the game went anymore. Remember that Mamedyarov ended up taking a pawn on b2 and getting crushed. But there you go, I can't even remember my own 50 moves opening articles. But that's the way that white would normally play. But, maybe knight c3 is not such a bad move either, saying, well, I'll just get my pieces out and see what you come up with. So black played bishop b6. We've already seen that's a very typical move for getting our centre pawns rolling. White got his own majority moving with f4. I think it's one thing that, is people really like about this line from white's point of view is, you have this unbalance very quickly, or imbalance between the different majorities. It's a question of what's more important, black's bishop pair or the fact his pawns are doubled. And when you have a lot of imbalances, that also gives you a lot of chances to outplay your opponent, even if they're a very strong player, as Bassem is here. So I'm not entirely sure if c5 was the best move. At the very least, it's quite a risky one, for reasons we'll see later. Maybe it's better just to castle and just play this position. Maybe after queen d4, then maybe it's more effective to go for c5 later on in the game. Apparently the best move for black, according to my live book, is rook to e8. But I feel if you have to play rook e8 that something's gone already a tiny bit wrong for black, maybe. I don't know, maybe I'm exaggerating. White can think about trying to get this sort of grip on these squares. I think black has to be quite accurate not to fall into a very passive position. I'd love to play f6, but unfortunately you get hit by a nice trick. I'll see if you can find it here for white. Well done. If you found f5, that would be a little bit of a pain if white gets, this pass pawn e6 and I think already is strategically close to lost for black. Because, you just can't find a good move for his pieces, and already the bishop is kind of going back to the starting square. Piece is nearly all set up for the next game, actually. So yeah, this shows that, maybe it is easier to play white in this sort of position, even though I'm sure objectively black is not worse by any means. I suppose you could also take, and maybe this is a better way to play it, just to go for, c5 and d4 one of these days. Maybe you start with queen e7, and so if you go queen e7 and c5 will often get hit by knight d5 with tempo. So yeah, it's true, even though I'm sure white's not objectively better, I think he can claim a practical advantage. So black decided to force matters with c5. We have to take e6. Since, after all, there is a question of this fork on d4. And now we come to a very interesting moment in the game, actually. I think that this is really quite a critical position. So, what would your suggestion be for white? How would we counter this idea of d4 with white to play? Feel free to pause the video, think about it a little. Well, I'm not sure if you guessed the move white played in the game. Played the move a4 saying, I don't care if you go d4. I'm going to go a5 and I'm going to take your bishop as well. That said, I'm not sure if this is really such a great transformation for white. Say if bc6, bc3 I should say. Maybe black will even just play, let's say bishop c6 might be a move. Or maybe just castles. Just keeping it simple might be best. And when white does eventually take, obviously we don't take with the a pawn for tactical reasons. But cb6 looks very decent. I mean, I think I even prefer black in this position, because white's bishop looks a little bit disappointing on e3 compared to the bishop on d7, which is not so obstructed by the pawns. So I think d4 is at least equal for black, actually. And it'd be interesting to see what what white had in mind after this. It's not that he's kind of a great move for white somehow. So what might be a better move than a4? Well, you could play bishop f2 and just anticipate d4 that way. But I think it's still a pretty good move. Where I can sort of see that bishop kind of get to a nice diagonal. And yeah, I'm really not sure that this is an advantage for white by any means. Actually, it's probably even better just to castle first. Just avoid any tactical problems and then go for bishop c6. Anyway, the game saw white play a4. Oh, I should mention this really cool line where white can go f5 and threaten this queen h5 idea. It's a nice little check. So they might castle, but then it's really interesting to play f6, and honestly I'm not sure who is really better in that position. I looked at the Chess24 automatic analysis, and apparently you have to go, apparently the best move is queen e8 to cover the queen side, which, is not the first move I would have thought of. I guess if you play gf6, you're just getting hit by, I don't know, queen to g4, king h8, and I mean, you probably have something with ef6 here. It sort of feels as though this is going to be a bit nasty for black, and okay, for rook f6, what's a good move for white to cash in the attack? So, actually my initial thought was to play bishop g5, but I just realised actually rook g6 is a really annoying pin in that case. I'm not so sure if this is the best continuation. So maybe it is better to play, let's say, rook f6 maybe. And after takes, then, yeah, something like rook f1. But they are offering to trade the queen, so with queen g7, which kind of limits our attack. So I feel like we can probably do better than that. You do have a little tactic where you can go knight d5 and try to use the pin. But I'm not sure if that works so well, actually. They can try queen at e5 even, which would bother me a little bit if I was white here. Just saying that when the knight moves, we can take the bishop like that. And if we try something fancy like, yeah, I was thinking bishop to f4 actually, but I think they can get away with taking our queen, our knight, or maybe not. Let's have a look. If rook to d1, so I mean they can't allow bishop e5. That would even be checkmate there. I thought they could defend with e5. But actually, I think we've got a nice move, queen h5, keeping this rook guarded. Also threatening our big bishop e5 check for a very strong attack. And they can't bail out with queen takes either, because then at the end of this, what black piece was left on pre? That's right, we can take the bishop, and yeah, we are just up material in this position. Their pawns are way too split, I think, from being able to mount a serious defense. Might be worth actually just checking with the computer, but no, I'm pretty sure my analysis is on the mark here. I mean, just instinctively, it doesn't feel like you can get away with gf6 in this sort of position. So anyway, the game saw white play a4, and after black's a5, okay, you don't win any prize for for saying that f5 is a move, because we already saw that was pretty good beforehand. And I think after castles, this f6 is again really good in this position. In fact, maybe you can even do something like knight d5. There's apparently a suggestion on the live book just to take, and I'm assuming the idea is to put a rook on d1. No, apparently it's to go e6 and just say that your center pawns are pretty good. Yeah, I can believe it. Actually, in fact, this is really very bad for black, because bishop c8 does give up the rook. But also in the case of bishop e8, okay, you probably see the tactic already. But we've got queen takes, and yeah, our e-pawn is going to become a queen next turn. So yeah, you can't even castle at this point. In fact, it just occurred to me, you probably could have done after, in the other position, right? After f5 and castles. You probably could actually go knight d5 here as well. In fact, with the... Ah, no, you can't. Ah, now I see. This is really, really smart. After takes. The reason why this doesn't work anymore is because black has this move bishop b5, which you don't have when these moves are thrown in. And white would actually lose a piece. So, yeah, a4 is a really, really clever trap, actually. And that's why black had to play d4, rather than, the automatic stop the threat with a5. Yeah, very nice. So after a5 and f5, I know what black should do. I still feel that maybe your best chance is to castle and maybe just play a pawn down and just not take back the knight on d5. But I can see why that didn't appeal to black. h5, it just looks wrong to play h5, because you're not really going to be able to castle safely now in the future. And I think white has a lot of good moves here, but, well, perhaps one of a more technical disposition might play queen f3 and just get the final piece in the attack. Those who are more playing in the spirit of Tal will not think twice to play knight takes d5. And speaking of Tal, well, Tal was, it was from Latvia, so, definitely white was playing in Tal's spirit here. So after e takes, queen takes d5. So already there are heaps of threats. You've got rook d1 and e6, and when you've got this many tactical ideas, you just kind of know something is going to work. And black's king is stuck in the center for basically the rest of the game. So black played rook b8. There are so many good moves here, I'm not even sure if this makes a good puzzle. But if you want to play f6, well, I think that's a good move as well. Just try to open up lines for your attack. gf6. How do you think white should take back in this position? Well, probably f6 is the best move. Just not letting the queen out and just allowing you to push with f7 and that sort of thing. When a king goes to f8, you can sort of gobble up pieces with check. It's usually a good idea. But if you want to play rook f6, I don't see a clear win after rook e7, but there's probably one here if we look hard enough. We've got rook f1 and there's some sort of tricks. I know. Something will come up if we play good moves. Anyway, in the game white played rook a d1, and it's a very good principle actually when you are trying to attack and mate their king. We want to make sure all of our pieces are in the attack. And with rook d1 we just give that e6 break a bit of extra strength. And f6 for that matter. So after queen e7, there are probably lots of good moves here, but I think this is an important position where if you give black a couple of disorganized defense, it might suddenly be a tough fight. So what do you think's a move for white to put paid to black's defense? Well, props to you if you found the move bishop g5, which is a great deflection to remove the defenders around black's king. And black can't really refuse the offer because queen f7 and e6 is a little bit sad for black. If takes, we can even show off, as I like to do, with queen d8. And we give a nice little checkmate in the style of Paul Morphy here. I think it is even called Morphy's mate, if I'm not mistaken. So after queen g5, queen takes. Nobody wants to lose a miniature, so, Amin did. Continue the game from here. You are a piece up, you may as well fight on. But at this point, white can pretty much choose the way he wants to win. Where his e6 move and just queening the pawns is definitely good enough. according to computer, you have a force mate with FG7, which I can't really be bothered to calculate it, but probably if you have... It's quite funny. Playing bishop f2 is the best move here. If you go queen g7, I mean, you probably have, I don't know, queen to e6. I mean, I'm sort of a bit lazy, so I'm just going to play rook d7 and say, oh, I won your queen, thanks for the game. So after, maybe rook f7's better, don't think it really matters. So after e6, black played rook to h6 here. I mean, what else are you going to do? You can't take, obviously, because you do get mated with queen to f7. So we had our rook to h6, and you know, our e-pawn keeps running down the board. I mean, it can't really, I guess, pass out saying, you know, that Ian Rogers saying that 2 connected pass pawns on the 6 beat everything up to a royal flush. 2 connect pass pawns on the 7th, well, I mean, that's just a dream come true. So after queen e3, guess what else? King h1. So at least for the moment here, after rook takes, and pawn takes, I should say. At least here, you know, e8 is covered at the moment. But we do have a way to win the house. Can you tell me the move white played to force black's resignation? Good work, team. We've got queen d8. And black resigned because, I mean, whichever way the cookie crumbles, we are going to be winning their rook. You know, king f7. Yeah, just queen b8. And, I mean, you're up the exchange. And their king is weak. And, okay, we can even go one move further and say, well, I'll just collect your pawns. Thank you very much. So, yeah, that was a really nice game that Antoms played against Antoms-Amin. And, you know, it just happens it's a nice little promotion for my my series on the Scotch Gambit that is coming up. So I hope you're looking forward to that and that you're going to really like my content, which I'm sure you know you're going to find very useful. You know, if you have some big tournaments in January coming up. I know I have a big one in the Australian Championship. It'll be great to, you know, catch up with all my friends. So yeah, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the game. And yeah, I shall be back tomorrow. See you then. Bye.